everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to transform their leadership, create more resilience, and generate more balance in their lives. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living, both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Tesla. I'm a full-time sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm glad you're with us today. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at the Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure you join our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join on Facebook. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and additional information every week. And I also send out content there that is just for them, so don't miss out on something that can help you in your life or your career. So join our list at thesquadroom.net. This episode is sponsored by OfficerPrivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is, people can do that research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find, even the bad guys. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. Sometimes that's literal and it's life or death, and other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to these risks. Being careful about what you post on social media doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why OfficerPrivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down the criminals and evidence on the computers and the internet that we now use. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 50 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they will remove you again. They also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and the technical ability to do it yourself. I don't, so that's why I use their premium service, but you can do it all yourself using their proprietary software. You can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 50 people search sites on the internet, and then use the software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure that you haven't been added back. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at OfficerPrivacy.com/the Squad Room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's OfficerPrivacy.com/the Squad Room. My guest today is Mike McGrew. Mike is a retired sergeant for the Santa Barbara Police Department, having served in a variety of capacities, from major crimes detective to POA president, PIO, and more. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
This is a treat for me because 2 reasons. We were just talking right before I hit record that I don't get to do a lot of in-person podcasts these days. So here we are. We actually are in person, yes, breaking out the old equipment for being in person. But I've known you for a long time, and I don't have a lot of guests on the show that I've actually known for a long time before they come on the show. Developed some great relationships with some great people as a result. But, you know, I think this is going to sound funny. I've known you longer than you've known me because we work at agencies that butt up against each other, right? And so we've, of course, interact on an agency level. But there's a couple big things throughout the year that your agency has that they always call us in to help with and request assistance on. And one of my very first interactions with an outside agency when I was brand new, and I don't expect you to know any of this, is what I'm telling you, was getting assigned to you to this big parade every year, or big weekend celebration in August here in Santa Barbara called Fiesta. And, you know, obviously there's a huge influx of visitors and tourists come in to celebrate. And of course there's a nightlife element to it as well. And my first interaction was getting assigned to you to walk around for the day. Yep. And so as this super young cop, who probably about 6 months out of the academy, gets stuck with, and I'm not being superfluous here because you're in the room with me, but the legendary Mike McGrew was something that was very intimidating at the time, but you very quickly put me at ease. And, you know, over the course of the remainder of your career, then as my career has progressed, we have intersected at times, but it wasn't until really after you retired where we actually sat and had a cup of coffee and started to talk about what you're doing, post-retirement. And that's where we'll cover a lot of ground today. But to give people a sense of who you are and your history, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was raised here in Santa Barbara, and I went to Dos Pueblos High School. I wrestled there, and then I went up to Cal Poly. I wrestled for Coach Hart, who was a very famous wrestling coach at the high school level. And then I went up and I wrestled for Von Hitchcock. And after the first year, I actually sustained a pretty bad injury. While I was working on my truck, a fan blade flew off the truck and damaged my hands pretty badly. So that was the end of my wrestling career, and I started working in the trades. And when I recovered, and I was working for a contractor, and then I ended up working for a painting contractor towards the 4 years into college up there, and just started thinking about just getting a career, basically, because working in the trades I loved it. It was a great job, but you didn't always work when it rained, and you didn't have a retirement, and you didn't have the things that I actually saw in my family growing up. My dad was the fire chief here for the city of Santa Barbara, so he worked 35 years at the Santa Barbara City Fire Department, and last 7 years he was a chief. My uncle, his brother, was the assistant chief when he retired, so he worked here in Santa Barbara as well at the fire department. My grandfather was Los Angeles City Fire Department. We got great uncles that were Los Angeles City Fire, and I got another uncle locally that was Santa Barbara County Fire. So I was looking at going into the fire service. They always say, what do cops, firefighters, and paramedics have in common? They all want to be a firefighter, but I'm glad I didn't go that route. Not because it isn't a noble and honorable job, but because law enforcement was a fit for me. So as I was testing and looking at different agencies, one of the firefighters said, "Did you ever think about being a cop?" And I hadn't. I had never thought about being a cop. And then 6 months later, I was in the academy. So I put in for San Luis PD and then also Santa Barbara PD, and I got hired here in 1986. And my career path was it went pretty quickly. Back then, we had a lot more shootings and stabbings and things that were going on. It was before 3 strikes and before the gun enhancements, and so people would go out and do an armed robbery, and you could actually shoot somebody in the stomach during an armed robbery and probably be out in 3 years. And so I don't think the public really appreciated that, but the caliber of criminals that we were chasing were people who did that. They knew that they could go out and do whatever they wanted, and the backlash would be pretty minimal for them. So crime was happening, and I had a beat that went from it was on Haley Street, was I think the lower end of it, right around Gutierrez, but then from State over to Milpa Street, and it was a pretty active place. We had a lot of bars in that area. Crack cocaine was a big deal back then, and we had a location where a lot of the Crips from Los Angeles would come up and deal crack. And so, for me, it was like you could leave the station and within 20 minutes you had a felony arrest, or you were in a foot pursuit or a fight or whatever it might be. And you went to, you didn't just go to, but you would get at least one shooting that was assigned to me, per week, and stabbings and bar fights and everything else. But we responded to a lot of pretty dangerous calls, and I loved the job. I did well at it, and I entered into a culture when I came on the department that was set up where you were just told, hey, it's a tough job, you're getting a paycheck, so go out and suck it up and do your best. And so you do. And you don't realize that you're entering a trauma-based profession, and that's going to hit you. And it does. It hits all of us, as you well know, at different levels. And the excitement is great. It's fun to go out there and do the action kind of things. But there's a lot of things that you respond to, yeah.
Right where you left off.
Okay. So, entering a trauma-based profession, the last thing you think is that you're going to be affected by it. And there was a lot of Vietnam veterans who paid the price, I feel, in the area of post-traumatic stress injuries that were the senior officers. And so that's who you followed. And it was just, it was a culture where you just sucked it up as best you could. And so I did. About 4 years into my career, I ended up being a field training officer. Then I ended up going into the detective bureau. I always loved working street narcotics, and I wanted to be a narc. But when I put in for the bureau, at that time you didn't really have a choice. So I was put in burglary, and it was an awesome job. I loved it because a lot of the burglars were people that had to deal with drug addictions, and there's a lot of dope connections to that. And so I worked with a really good sergeant, Bob Lowry, who he retired as a captain and went to the DA's office, but a man that I really respected. Got to work with a couple other partners that you probably worked with Mark Swartz and Tom Miller and Tom Eccles and a few other guys that it was just a really fun detail. And I got to work with the sheriff's department, so I got to work with your agency a lot. And I really enjoyed that because you're able to, crooks don't know the boundaries we do when it comes to taking a report. We know exactly where the city and county lines are, but
especially when it's a traffic accident.
Yeah, especially.
We know exactly where that jurisdiction line is.
Yeah, exactly. So it was cool because I got to work, with a lot of interagency, just collaboration and chasing bad guys down, and it was a lot of fun. But in the detective bay, we were next to the major crimes unit, and that's all the homicides, the robberies, the shootings, stabbings, everything else. And I really kind of had a heart for that because I'd volunteer every time they had a homicide. They'd activate the whole bureau, and you'd go out, and I would always want to help them out. Whatever it was, whether it was canvassing or what. I just loved being a part of it. And about a year later, then an opening came up in that detail, and so I came into the major crimes unit. And we have a career development, which means that you can spend 5 years in one detail, and then you'd have to rotate out, and depending on what the detail was. But so I did my 5 years back there, and came back and forth to patrol, and so for most of my career, I worked in the bureau. I'd come out for a year. I loved working patrol, but I also loved working major crimes and working homicides. To me, that was a big deal. But that's a detail that can chew you up and it can spit you out because you're dealing with child molesters as well. You're dealing with sex crimes and just child abuse and just some of the elder abuse and things that really can take a piece of your heart that you're never going to see again. And so I was no stranger to that. And I started to do what I think a lot of first responders do, and that is that you deal with such dark stuff out in the streets or in the detective bureau, the investigations that you handle, that you start to hold onto it, and you don't really have a place to lay down the traumas or the things that you experienced on a daily basis. So when you come home, I was checked out because you wouldn't want to tell your family what you experienced that day or your neighbors or friends. Why would you? There's times that we do this job, as you well know, that we're doing it because we don't want anybody else in the whole wide world to have to do what we're doing at certain times.
And you had started a family by this point, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you started
I
young,
did.
but
Yeah,
by now you have a wife.
Yeah. First year on the job, I had my first child, Taryn, and then I had 2 more children, Matt and Michael, and we called him TT. And so they were all 2 years apart. But so I spent a lot of birthdays away from the family. I spent a lot of Christmases and holidays, and just getting called out and going in, and you think you're going to be there, but you're not, and you're in a place that's usually not a place you want to be, because it's you're not home and you're dealing with something that's pretty tragic. So I think what happens to first responders is that that isolation begins to happen, and you start hanging out with cops basically because they understand who you are, and then you start working some more overtime, and because it makes sense, and you're with people that get you, and you're doing a job that you are good at, and it's meaningful, and you're making a difference in your community, but there's a cost to all that, because you start to not lose friends, but you quit interacting with a lot of the friends that you had before you were.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So as the years went on, about 20 years into my career, I'd been working, pretty much half my career was in major crimes. The other half was patrol. As a detective and a detective sergeant, and then also as a patrol officer and patrol sergeant too. So that's where I spent most of my career. But about 20 years into my career, the trauma that we experience and the pressure that first responders experience began to sneak up on me, and it's something that does exactly that, sneaks up on you. You don't expect it, and the fallout is failed relationships, and doing things that you're looking for, that comfort or that place or that peace, and it's not really there. It wasn't there for me. So I would come home and just have a drink, and so that was my go-to on how I dealt with stuff, and really I was not dealing with anything that I needed to deal with. And 20 years into my career, something that happened to me that just turned me upside down. It was when my youngest child, Michael, was diagnosed with bone cancer. He was 12 years old, and that flipped everything upside down, because we're used to going out and dealing with everybody else's issues and solving the problems, and we do a good job at it, and people, it's like working in that career was amazing, because you worked with such amazing people of courage and character that did things that were just like beyond comprehension for most people in the community to even understand. Just the bravery, the compassion, and the restraint too. People don't know how much restraint is out there. Because there's several times where deadly force could have been an option on some of the calls that I've been out to, but we took it that extra step, and put ourselves in further danger, whether it was a millisecond or 5 minutes, whatever it might be, to make sure that we didn't have to do that, and that you protected even the criminals the best that you could. So having something like that hit me personally, and being out of my control, I had no, it was so foreign to me, and it just flipped things upside down, because here I was the person that was in need of some help. And so we had a battle on our hand, and my son lost his leg to the cancer. So when he was 12, he had his leg amputated, his left leg, and then they ended up, we had to go through chemo. So we spent about 200 days a year in the hospital, and he almost died probably 6 different times, just from the chemo and the effects that happen, and just the infections and the things that can happen when somebody goes through chemotherapy. But when my son got diagnosed, what happened was the department, and that's what's really remarkable about this profession, is just the brotherhood and the sisterhood that we have, with the folks that we work with, and just what a family you really are, because we're out there, even if you Yeah, we're always there watching each other's back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we have a disagreement or we disagree on whatever it might be, you know.
Like siblings, really.
Yeah, basically. but you're always there for each other. So the police department and the sheriff's department and the fire department, they wanted to help our family out, and they had a barbecue up at Earl Warden Showgrounds, and they were going to sell. They were selling chicken lunches for $7 to help raise money for co-pays and travel and things, because we had to go down to UCLA a lot and stay over there, and it gets pretty expensive. You have insurance, but it's the co-pays can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So when they had that, they had this big barbecue and came together. 10,000 people from the community showed up, and it was something that you just can't even. There's no words for it. You can't say thank you enough, unless you opened your heart up and said, "Here, look inside, and this is how you impacted me." And but what it does do when you're on the receiving end of something like that is that it creates a synergy to want to be able to help others, so you're going to pay it forward, and that became a transition for me, is just to be there for the other people, because I knew how important it was. And there was a firefighter by the name of Mike DePonce that he had been diagnosed with cancer, and the department worked, everybody in that department worked a shift for him throughout the months so that he could go through his cancer battle. And he was a brand new firefighter, was afraid he was going to lose his job because he had this battle on his hands. But they took care of him in a big way. And so when my son got diagnosed, Mike came up to me and he said, "Hey," he says, "I want to tell you something." He said, "There's going to be a lot of people that want to help you, and he said, my advice is let them." He said, for two reasons. One is it makes them feel better, and two, you're going to need it. And he was right on. He was right on the money. So, there was that shift, from being the helper to somebody who actually got helped, and we're the last people that asked for it in this profession, because we're people of service. We have servants' hearts, and we want to be there for other people. We don't expect anybody to be there for us, and we do the job to a level that could even cost us our lives, but it's because we care, and that's the people that I worked with and that you work with, and it's you could take whatever sheriff, police patch and just put another one on from a city across the country, and it's the same. It's really amazing people that just get called to this profession, and that's what it is. It's a calling. Because you're not going to get rich, and but there's stability there, and that's all I was looking for, So
let me ask you a question real quick. So, because you touched on a couple points already that I want to tackle, but after 20 years was when Michael got his diagnosis. You were already in for 20 years, but you've talked about how the trauma affects us, but that's obviously not something you knew at the time. Right, you were putting it aside, or you were pushing it down, or however, and you were dealing with it. You said, maladaptive techniques, like often, like that are just so common. But two points I think of in that. One is I want to know. Well, I'll make the point first. The first point is you said it, but we go to work and we solve these other problems. We solve problems for other people. We are surrounded by problems every day, right? Our job is really problem solving. And for some people, it is a life or death issue, or they are engaged in their own life or death struggle. But what we forget so often for ourselves and for our families is we remain human. And when you take off the vest and you get in your car and you drive home, you still have the same challenges as those people you were dealing with on the street.
Right.
You may not have the socioeconomic issues. You may not have the things like gang affiliations as a dramatic example. But when you get home, you still have children to care for. You still have bills. You still have the possibility that someone's going to get sick. And those things on top of what we do for the 12 hours or 10 hours we're at our shift every day can really compound it for a first responder. And I don't think we give ourselves enough grace as a group when we try to navigate those things. And I think what you just said about accepting the help is a really powerful thing, because that is a hard thing for a first responder to do.
Absolutely.
And not only because we want to be the one helping and serving, but I think we also have an assumption of weakness, that accepting help is the equivalent of a weakness, because the people who need help when we are at work call us because they need help, and we can very easily start to judge that scenario as the helper as being stronger than, or that those people that we are helping on a call for service are weaker than us, when I think a safer or a healthier perspective is we are all humans regardless of what uniform we're wearing, and that we all need help at different times, and we may be called upon to help others, and we may call upon others to help us.
Right.
And you had that really come to fruition with your son's diagnosis.
Yeah. So I had to face it, and that's, there was a lot of bad things that happened during that journey, but there's a lot of good things that came out of it, and just seeing the benefits of being on the receiving end of that, and just opening up and just kind of putting down your pride a little bit and saying, all right, you know what, I do need some help. So at that point in my life, I'd been through 2 marriages, I'd lost 2 marriages. I was in a battle for my son's life, basically. And I'd go back to patrol. That's what sent me back to patrol. I was working in the bureau as the major crime sergeant when he got diagnosed, but I went back to patrol so that I could work the 12 plan on the weekends and take care of my son during the week, and then his mom could watch him on the weekends. So we had it pretty much covered. And at the same time that was all going on, my older son Matt got involved in drugs, and it was pretty. For the first 2 years, I could spot a user a mile away on the streets, but it was going on in my own home. And I didn't see it really for 2 years, and because you just start to try to rationalize some things that are happening. You're thinking, this couldn't be, this is not my kid, but it was my kid. And when I took him into his second rehab, it was a rehab that allowed the family members to come in, because there's different programs that are set up, and a lot of them are just there to deal with the person that's struggling with the addiction, and not really the family, but it's a big time family issue. It's a really big time family issue. It affects the whole family. It did me, and there's codependency, and there's just all kinds of things that also sneak up on you in that battle. Because at first I thought, I'll just put him in a rehab, he'll be all right, and we'll just move on with life. But that wasn't the case. And as I was sitting with him, for me, it became my low point where, with drinking. And I was thinking, why, how did this happen? Why am I sitting here in a rehab with my son, and who had a heroin and meth addiction, And I thought about it, and I thought about just how I was modeling dealing with the things that were happening to me on the job, and basically how I wasn't dealing with them. I'd come home, have a drink, or just be checked out, go find that chair and watch TV or whatever it was, and I knew then that had to change, So that was my sobriety date, and so the battle continued, and I learned a lot going through that process. I learned a lot about myself, about families who have somebody with an addiction, and just it gave me empathy at a level that I didn't have before as a cop. It changed everything for me, because I could go out in calls now and a parent who had a child with a drug addiction, I'd stand there in uniform and tell them, well, I know what this is like because my son has a drug addiction. And I felt like that was some more of the fallout of just the stresses and the traumas that first responders have to deal with, and because it doesn't just affect them, it affects their families.
Do you think his addiction is the vicarious trauma as a result of
do.
your career and how you dealt with it?
I do. I really do. You can't blame yourself, and people have their own choices, and he had his own choices.
Sure.
And, but I also feel like it was some fallout from that.
How old was he when you first?
He was like 15 when he started using. And,
young.
Yeah, started smoking pot, and then led into the harder drugs.
The numbing of that.
Yeah.
You said you'd come home and have a drink, but then you mentioned a decision to get sober and a sobriety date. Was it? Do you consider yourself that you were an alcoholic at the time, or was it just that you no longer wanted that?
Back then, I don't know that I ever labeled myself as an alcoholic. Other people probably could have, but but it's I'm a faith was something I didn't have back then, but now I am a man of faith, so I don't believe in speaking those kind of word curses over ourselves, so people
the labeling of yourself.
Yeah, you don't need to label yourself. It's for me, it's if I sat in a group today, but and faith is what's kept me sober, but if I sat in a group today and somebody, they went around the room and said, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, I'd say, no, I'm a new creation in Christ, and that's who I am.
It's not who you identified as.
Right, yeah.
But it was the coping mechanism that you went to at the time, and
and it wasn't healthy, and I did drink too much, and it was not cool.
Let me interrupt. Sorry. Yeah. I'm always curious about these moments. When is the first time? Was it sitting in that rehab center with him was that the first time you realized that this was out of control, or had you felt this in the past, or had these little bubbling of thoughts?
I knew there were times where it's just like, I need to set the bottle down. The answer's not here, but I didn't have another answer really because of the culture that was set up. If you reached out and you wanted to get help, it was a sign of weakness. You didn't want to be that guy. And so drinking was acceptable.
Sure, choir practice, right?
So and so that's what happened. A lot of Vietnam veterans. That's what happened to a lot of World War II veterans. And Korean. But anybody that's gone through that's it's not an uncommon way to deal with it.
Not at all.
It's accepted in the culture. But it wasn't healthy. It wasn't something I needed to be doing, and now I saw the fruits of it, and it was in my own child. So I went through the different programs with sobriety, not for myself, but I went in as a codependent. But you could substitute codependent for alcoholic
Sure.
or addict or whatever it might be. It's all the same, and I think codependency is probably the harder one to deal with than actually being the person that's the addiction or dealing with alcohol.
That's interesting. Why that?
Because codependency is something that's very difficult. You have to get to that place where you're not enabling, and you don't think that you ever are, but you have to realize when you are, and setting boundaries and attaching yourself to another person's addiction is very tough. So when my son was using, I was not doing good, but if he was sober, and he'd have 9 months here or there, sprees of that, and then everything was great, but it was just like I was on this roller coaster ride, and I finally had to realize, no, I got to step off this. This is his ride, and he's going to have to be the person that comes to this. I can't fix it for him, right? As much as you want to as a parent or as a loved one, fix it for the other person, that's not going to happen.
Right.
It has to come within. And
do you think that started, and again, sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that was exacerbated or made worse by the fact that your younger son, Michael, was struggling with the cancer, and you have a young kid who can't advocate for themselves or is not capable of advocating as much as an adult can. But you're also, I imagine, because I'm a parent as well, putting so much weight and hope into a positive outcome in that situation that you're giving over a huge chunk of your psyche to something outside of your control in that sense.
Yeah.
And so you're already done that, and now dealing with your older son's addiction.
Yeah, because the addiction was real similar to the cancer battle. It was something that was out of my control, and I needed a place to just like something to trust and something to believe in and have hope in, and so that did come about halfway through my younger son's battle with his cancer. I came to the Lord, and it changed things for me. It was transformative, actually, and I started to get that. I had that mustard seed of faith, and it just began to grow inside of me, and it was something that brought hope, and that's what God wants for us. His promises are to give us a hope in the future, not to harm us and not beat ourselves up, and so it made sense to me, and I just put my faith in God, and that's not to say that I instantly changed everything, because I used to say that prayer, I believe, Lord, but help me with my unbelief, because there's a lot of things that didn't make sense to me about faith. And
did you grow up in a religious household?
Nope.
Or
no, not at all. I had a lot of people praying for me. There was a lot of people that were praying for me when my son was diagnosed, and praying for me as they saw me go through my own struggles, and I didn't want to hear it at the start when TT got diagnosed, and people would talk to me about God, but I'd be like, if there's a God, then why does my 12-year-old have cancer, and why is he missing his leg, and why, there's a lot of questions that I had about that. I mean, now I actually get kind of angry about it.
I was going to ask. I mean,
I would, and I'm just like, well, then why? Why would God let something like this happen? And but I did come to that place where it was just like I had no place else to look other than up, because I was just in a really dark place, because of my son's lifestyle, my other son's illness, my own way of trying to fix things in a worldly way, and it wasn't working. So I gave it up, and I said, all right, Lord, I'll give it to you.
After the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact there's so much of my life that is out there accessible to the public. And yes, I know that I'm a public figure in some sort of way, but even then, it still makes me uncomfortable. And I've been trying to figure out where the line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast or on social media or in interviews I give, and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think that my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house, 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough of worrying about it and felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seems insurmountable, and I learned that, honestly, it is. But there's a lot that we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at OfficerPrivacy.com, who are helping me to clean up my side of the internet. A quick Google search shows just a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. To learn more about how they can keep you safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. What was that? What was that moment like? Or do you remember? Was there an interaction with someone? Did a mentor or somebody provoke something in you?
No,
or was
there was. I went to so my current wife, Nicole. Our first date. We went to a Chris Tomlin concert, and he's a Christian worship singer, and it was at the County Bowl, and I didn't I had no idea what it was. I just wanted to go out with a pretty girl, so I went.
You agreed to anything
Yeah,
at that
yeah.
point.
I'm like, yeah, I'll go. So, but I was sitting there, and there was a pastor that came out. His name was Louis Giglio, and he spoke to the crowd, and he said, "Is there anybody out there who?" And he just went down my checklist, like every single one of them, that feels like they're in a dark place, that there is no hope, that there is, and he just went right down everything that I was feeling, and it was so supernatural for me. I was looking around at these other 5,000 people that were there, and I was thinking, what? How does this guy know my story? And so that's when I got my bell rung, And my cousin Danny McGrew was a police officer. He came on 5 years after me. He retired since then from the Santa Barbara Police Department as a lieutenant, and now he works at the DA's office as a investigator, and he's like in charge of the investigators. But Danny was a man of faith, and so I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, maybe you can tell me about Jesus." And he said, "Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment."
Really?
Yep. And so that's when the mustard seed got planted, and then I just, this fire just started inside of me, and I just started to go out, and it brought me to another level of service while I was out in the field and handling other people's calls. I realized that, I was equipped with a testimony, testimony of a child that was facing a deadly disease, another child that was facing a deadly addiction, but I also was able to lay that stuff down and begin to trust the Lord with just the stresses that were coming along with that, and going, okay, God, I'm going to trust you with this. And about what happened was TT's battle was it was 6 years. He was 12 when he got diagnosed, and then when he was 18, I had a couple years into my faith. It was in the middle of his battle that I came to faith, and he the cancer had come back 3 times, so it hit his lung, which was fatal. It hit his other leg, and they were going to do a double amputation, but they didn't want to because they didn't, just the psychological reasons for that. And so they tried to do a limb sparing surgery that never really stuck, where they took all his bones out, and that thing would fall apart all the time. And I mean, he had this poor guy had been through a lot, and it had this child had stolen. He was in the hospital and with other children that had cancer and had the same battle on their hands, and losing friends. So they become very close, and you become close with other families in there as well. But how many kids lose their friends, and more than one, and with something that they're battling themselves. And so, anyways, I had this place that I could finally get some peace, and it seems weird that you would get peace in the middle of something like that, but that's what God gives you, when I gave him my heart. And when he was 18, the way it ended was he ended up committing suicide, and I didn't see that one coming. It was, I was working that day, and so and it happened in the city, so I basically, went to my own son's suicide call. And when I got there, the other officers, they were trying to figure it out. They were getting a hold of me. I was getting these cryptic calls, and I was told to go report to the watch commander's office. So I did, and I was standing in the watch commander's office, and he wasn't there, and I asked another officer, I said, "Hey, where's the watch commander?" And they called me in, and he said, "Well, he's over at a dead 18-year-old over on Garden Street," and he gave the address, and it was my son's address. And so I'm like, that's my boy's address, And at first I thought it was Matt, I didn't know anything. But when I showed up, there was a sea of blue there, and And brown and green. The
tan and
sheriff's
green.
department was there in the coroner's office. But everybody, it was, nobody had a word. Nobody could have a word, I think, in those moments. But their presence meant everything to me. It was just like that ministry of presence. And if you want to know if somebody cares, just watch them show up. And because that's how you show you care. You're just there. You may not know what to do or what to say, but being there is important. So God showed me a few supernatural miracles that happened then, and I had all the right people that I needed around me at that time, and I saw His grace big time.
How? I don't mean to interrupt you because this is powerful, but I think of these things and think of my own son, and we touched on it a second ago, but the level of anger that I think is natural for someone for this to provoke, or at least the questions about why or what's the purpose behind something like this. And if someone allows that anger to really fester or grow, I think our natural tendency is to revert back to the things that we were numbing with in the past. How'd you not do that? How did you stay the course and find a path out of this in a positive way? What were the resources you had, or that you used, or you called upon?
Well, faith was a big one, and you don't understand God's plans. You don't understand His ways are not ours, right? So they're and He, the cancer, I believe is that, that didn't come from the Lord. That comes from the enemy. Illness and sickness and all these things. That's what Satan wants to do. His job is to kill, steal, destroy. So, but God allows things at times, and so He allowed that to happen to our family for a bigger reason. And to me, it's not all about being here on earth. There's eternal life that we have to look forward to. So that's the hope. And I knew that my son was in a place, he was in heaven, where there is no more pain or suffering or the things that we have to deal with here. So I knew that he was okay, and that I would see him again. So it's not, so I mean, that gave me that hope to do that. And I also knew that I needed to take, what I was going through and use that in a way. So I took some time off, and I took a few weeks off and went back to patrol. And
by this point, when this happens, are you, again, not to overuse the word, but were you angry at Michael, or were you understanding of the circumstances?
No, I wasn't angry at him at all. I could understand what happened, and I spent like about 5 minutes going, why didn't I catch this, but when I thought about, when we're created, there is an expiration date. We all have one, and some are sooner than others.
Right.
And so, Michael was a blessing, because the community came around him, and they just loved him. He was such a loving guy, and he loved the other kids that were going through the same battle that he was going through, and he was an inspiration to some of the younger kids too, as he went through that, and other amputees. And I mean, it was amazing to see what God was doing through that whole journey, and how He was using my son.
Do you find that that your faith helps you manage or mitigate or eliminate the need for hope? And I can explain that, but we so often hope things, and as a parent, I hope for so many things for my kids, and as you touched on, there's an expectation that we're all going to live to 90 years old and expire in our sleep, but that's not the case. We see that every day in our jobs, where someone passes for inexplicable reasons, or for a very specific reason that was out of their control even. But we put hope into so many things, which I think is different than faith. Hope, we want something to happen, and then we have a fear that we create if it doesn't happen. But seems to me that faith might might mitigate some of that need for hope. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for me, faith is hope.
Same thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And so it doesn't, because the enemy wants to take our hope away. He wants to take our joy away. He wants to take all those things away. And there is a spiritual battle. I mean, it's real. There's God, and then there's Satan, and it's on. And we're in the middle of that battle while we're here in the world. But having my faith in God gives me hope, and it gives me hope for eternal life and hope to be able to be with my son again.
Sure.
And more, it's more than just hope. It's like I know that that's going to happen. So, and God showed me, He encourages us along the way. It's not like you go through these things and don't get help or encouragement. So that God provides, and when they had that barbecue, the money that they raised lasted until the very day that he died.
Wow, really?
The very day that he died. And so God had provided for our family, so he was always there for us. He was giving us everything that we needed and everything that I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't see it until you look back on it, and then you see it,
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to patrol. I was working as a patrol sergeant, and I had to take about a month off because my head wasn't in the game, and you can't go out and do this job if you're not functioning on all cylinders, because it gets dangerous, for you and your partners and everybody else. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you got to be this, as you well know, this is the job that you have to be like finely tuned and ready to go and ready for anything when you step out there and get in that car. So, but I told God, I said, God, I don't want to go to any more dead kid calls. I don't want to go tell anybody that they lost a loved one, and I don't want to do any more death notification. I'm out. Just leave me out of this, And when I went back, those were all the calls that I got, like every single one, it seemed. And I was going, what are you doing? And so, but I quickly learned that here I was, and a lot of them were people who lost children, and I was standing on their porch or in their doorway, and I was able to share that I had just lost a son, and they would ask me, how are you even surviving? Because to lose a child is the biggest hit that somebody can take. It is the biggest hit I've ever taken. And but I was able just to point up, said, God gave me the strength to be able to do this. And he gave me the strength to give my son's own eulogy. He gave me the strength to do, things that you just couldn't do. You couldn't even think about doing,
Mm-hmm.
But that happened. And so I saw how I was being used now in a different way. But I still, I had faith, but I also still I still needed to reach out, so I reached out for counseling, and found out quickly the importance of getting the right counselor, because I wasn't just a grieving father. I was somebody who carried 20 years worth of really dark stuff
Right.
at the police department, and that I hadn't unloaded on anybody. There's, you can think of them as I'm talking, but those big trauma cases where you went in and you're just like, and you haven't laid that down anywhere. You still carry it around with you. And so, and there's a lot of them. There's not just one. There's a lot of them that happens to first responders. So, so I found the right person, and if you don't have the right person, the counselor can end up just crashing on you, and they'll start crying, and next thing you know, you're counseling a counselor, because that's who we are. And,
Yeah.
And so I realized just the importance of cultural competency, and if a first responder is going to see somebody, that they need to see the right person. And because of the help that I got, and I laid some stuff down, I thought that I had dealt with it, through that counseling, and just by laying it out there and like putting it down. But I had learned later that I didn't actually deal with it. But I had gotten back on track, and I was functioning. I was surviving, and I started to think about just our profession and the things that happened to me and the things that happened to friends that we work with, because we both know people that have committed suicide, first responders that were just solid people that you never thought were going to do, you were just so shocked when it happened. it was the fallout from the job, I think, most of the time. And or we see people that drink themselves to death, you know, whether they were on duty or they retired, and 3 years later they were dead.
Yeah.
You know? And so I started thinking about that, and just the culture that we had set up for ourselves, right? And the weakness that was associated with getting help, and just everything that was out there. And you know, why we had a profession that has like a very high suicide rate, a very high divorce rate, a very high alcohol substance abuse rate. It's something that that was I'm going, we're not doing this right. We're not doing this right. So as I thought about that, I thought about the barriers that kept me and kept other people that I know away from getting help. One was the culture. The other one was that to get help, you know, you may have to reach out to an employee assistance program, and that's something that nobody wants to do because you don't want your boss to find out, and you don't want to be put on the rubber gun squad because you're reaching out and getting help, and you know, have your gun taken away and your badge, and you know, so nobody's going to do that. You know, I didn't for those reasons. Or if you use your insurance, you know, the same issues come up where they got to speak a diagnosis over you, and you know, who wants that on their medical record? And then in both of those realms, you don't know that you're going to get the right counselor, because EAP programs give you whoever, you know, they give you the person that, you know, is working on the streets department, who I love the people in the streets department, but they don't have the same issues that we have as first responders. So I was on the police foundation, Santa Barbara Police Foundation, and it was my way of paying it forward because we were, I was one of the founding members, but we were raising money to help raise money for equipment, and then also for other first responder cops that and their families that were going through catastrophic situations like what happened to me, because I knew I wasn't going to be the last person that went through what I went through, and nor was I.
And this is a nonprofit that's kind of attached in a quasi way to the department, but it generates some donate. This is pretty common here in California, at least. And I think it's common in the country.
It is.
You have these benefactors, people who want to help in some way.
Right.
You have departments that have needs that they can't be funded through the agency, or maybe there's other officer-specific things. So this is what you mean by the police foundation.
And that's what we're doing. You know, and like the canine program, you know, it's all that comes through. Public,
that's very common.
Comes through donations. You know, the city didn't pay for that. You know, the community comes together and helps raise that money. So those type of issues. But then also I wanted to help in those places where somebody that went through something like what I did. You know, we could be there for them, like they were for me. So I was thinking, well, let's you know, I started praying a lot about this, and I was thinking, you know, what could we do to change the behavioral health aspect of what first responders go through. And you know, so I came up with an ADDIE. The program is called ADDIE. So we came up with the ADDIES program, and it was under the Santa Barbara Police Foundation umbrella. And what we do is raise money through the community, and then we'd have a helpline that somebody could call that would be completely separate from the department, the cities, the counties, anywhere else. Nobody is totally confidential. Somebody could call that number and not have to worry about their boss finding out, not having to worry about their friends finding out, anything else, and then get them in with a culturally competent clinician, somebody that understood how to deal with trauma, how to deal with first responders, how to deal with first responders' family members. And you know, my experience going through the sobriety programs that our family went through, I knew that it was important that we included the families too.
Sure, yeah.
So Michael Armenhammer is he's the chairman of the Armenhammer Foundation, and he's another man of God, but he's also somebody who really respects first responders and respects the military, and this man just has an amazing heart. And I got introduced to him, and I just sat down with him, and I told him what was on my heart, and really started praying about it. And that's when the ADDIES program basically formed. And so he's the co-founder of the ADDIES program, with me. And so we started this off and started at the police department. We had people started using it, and senior officers started talking about the benefits of using it publicly and saying, hey, you know what, this really helped me out. And, you know, we start to care for each other and change this, because one of my prayers has been changing the conversation around post-traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was watching it happen, and the next thing I knew, the fire department wanted it, and then the sheriff's department, and before I knew it, we were serving from San Luis Obispo down to Ventura County. We were serving 600 first responders and their families, you know, a year, family members a year, and so it grew to this place that I never really expected. But a lot of it was prayer. A lot of it was just God blessing it and just kind of dedicating. It's a secular program, you know. It's not something that is. It's not a faith-based program, but it is in the sense that it came out of my heart, you know, and came out of prayer. So I about the program's been in existence for over 8 years now, and about 2 years ago, the demand became so great that we were getting calls from other counties and other throughout the state and other states and other, you know. So Michael Hammer said, well, let's take it national, you know, let's do something national. So he gave us a financial runway, just very generous man, gave us financial runway to start this program up. And we've taken what's began here in Santa Barbara and spread throughout the Central Coast, and we're taking it across the country now. And we came out from underneath the Santa Barbara Police Foundation, because it didn't make sense to, you know, write a check to donors to the police foundation. You know, it's like, this is the Addie's program. And the community came around it big time. And we had some amazing people in the community that really love the folks that are out there serving and really have a heart for them. And they came around us and just brought in their friends and donors. And it was just amazing to watch this thing grow. And it was amazing just to see how people were attracted to the program, and whether they were using it, whether they wanted to support it. There were agencies that, as we started the program, they were going, well, we don't know, you know, we got an EAP, and, you know, or you'd have an HR department or you know, whoever, risk manager, that was nervous about it. And then I'd just say, look, you know, we're not asking for your permission. You know, we're just telling you the program's here. It's an option, and we're not here to take away anybody else's, you know, thunder, but we're here to help, you know. And so it began to grow. And if you look at employee assistance programs, they have their usage rate is about 3%. So if you have an insurance company that does an actuarial and says, okay, we're going to provide this employee assistance program, a lot of times there's a limit on it, on how many times you can use the program, or
right, yeah,
you know, there's a lot of limitations. But here in the Santa Barbara region, it's 25% usage rate. So it shows you the need, and it shows you the success of the program. And we've you know, we're in several states right now. We just started regional offices up in Las Vegas, so we're serving the Las Vegas Metro Police Department and Fire Department. We're going up into Chicago. We're up in Minneapolis and Minnesota after the George Floyd incident. Lots of things happening there.
So real quick, you said, so 3%, about EAP gets used by about 3% of employees, but you're saying that at ease is being used by about 25% of the available first responders in this region?
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it is. And it doesn't happen like instantly. You know, people have to trust the program, and they begin to know it. But as the program builds,
right,
that's how you know. So.
And I think, you know, to walk through some of the specifics of it, I think it's important for people to understand, because your funding doesn't come from insurance. It doesn't come from county risk management. There is no connection other than really the only connection to any agency is, hey, you want to hang a poster up in your break room so people know who to call.
Right.
Everything else is kind of self-generated by the employee or the deputy or the paramedic or the firefighter.
Right.
But when they call at ease and they get connected with a clinician, it's completely confidential.
Mm-hmm.
Like the department they don't get a notice or anything like that. There's no bill sent to the agency. There's no bill sent to insurance. There's no even bill sent. This is, I think, the amazing part. And this is why I think this is just such a game changer for how we treat mental health with first responders in the future. There's not even a bill sent to the first responder,
Right,
or to their spouse or whoever it is that's seeking the treatment. Everything is covered through the donations and through the funding of the benefactors, of the people who want to help.
right.
And I think that's powerful in two really important ways. One is when you alleviate the financial burden, because those things are expensive, right? Like if you go through insurance,
Yeah, it's
good luck finding a clinician that is culturally competent. Good luck finding a clinician that takes like mass insurance, because they don't.
Right.
Because there is such a mental health crisis generally, they don't even need to take insurance. Their schedules are full without having to jump through the hoops of insurance. So if you're not going to pay insurance as a cop, you're looking at like what, 125, 150, 175 bucks an hour
right.
to go, and they want you to go once a week. Like that immediately creates a financial burden that no cop is going to be able to handle, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like a perpetual system of not getting the help. So what you've come up with to me is amazing. And the second part of that, I think that's reassuring, or that's amazing to point out, is that you just listed off the cities where you're growing. I think you and I agree, live in an area where we feel very supported by our community, and they show it to us. And that's not always the case, right? Not every jurisdiction has a welcoming community for their cops. But as you expand throughout the country, you are proving the point that there are people who want to come to our aid.
Yes.
And who are looking for ways to pay back the service we give. And it's something I talk about here on this show and we talked about it earlier about being willing to accept help, but let other people be of service to you and open yourself to that. And that includes a clinician or a counselor, but it also includes the anonymous person who funded the chance for you to have this counseling, right? And we create more of our humanity, I guess, by opening ourselves to that.
Yeah. And it's and the fruits of it are amazing, because now I have people that come and they talk, and they'll give their testimony about the need to reach out. If you go through something, you go and get in a shooting, it doesn't have to be a shooting. It can be whatever it is.
You may not even know what it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Or, all of a sudden people say, yeah, you go through a traumatic event and you got to do a debrief, and you're like, yeah, I'm fine, but my marriage sure sucks. And so, and you just start to watch those things. But what's happened is that the feedback has been, you've saved, they'll say, hey, Mike, you know what? I was going to eat my gun and I didn't.
Yeah. And
I'm here today because of this program. Or, my marriage was gone and now it's not. Or my career is now flourishing and I was burnt out, and now I'm back, enjoying what I'm doing, and I have a new drive for it. And so that just comes from people just going in and getting the right help. So what we do is we vet out the counselors. We sit them down. We'll get into a network of counselors. As we go into different regions, we'll find that we have that relationship with the agencies, the first responder agencies, but we also develop the relationship with the community and the donors, and then we build up a strong clinical team. And so that clinical team can include people that know how to deal with trauma, and there's different modalities like EMDR or brain spotting or art therapy or whatever it might be. And art therapy is like accelerated resolution therapy, but it's not drawing pictures. But there's different things that people do that work for them, and then we also have people that are specialized in marriage counseling, that specialize in children, or eating disorders, or things that you would never think, or drug and alcohol counselors. We have a strong base clinicians that do that. And these clinicians all come in because they have a heart for first responders. That's what's really cool. Is a lot of them even lower their rates because they want to help. They know that this program works. They know that this program is something a way that they can contribute, to their community. Because when we keep our first responders strong, they're out there making those life and death decisions, and they're making the right decisions, and you get rid of the aggression that can come along with somebody who's holding a lot, or you get rid of there's just so many factors that you eliminate, and it really helps the community flourish. And so that's why it's important to support the first responders, but it's also, like you said, it's important for the first responders to see that the community wants to invest in them, that they care about them, that they don't want us to get chewed up and spit out, that they actually care about us and our families, and that they want to do the best that they can to keep us whole. And so that's what this program's allowed. It's given a pathway for all that to happen, and it's been really incredible. As I went into Las Vegas, and this happened about 4 months ago now, but we just started moving into there, and my son, who was dealing with the drug addiction, so this is my older son, Matt, he had a year of sobriety, and I ended up adopting his daughter. I have his daughter. I've had her since she was about 2 years old, and because of the drug addiction, and so I raised her, and she's an awesome little girl. But she had told me that her dad was over in Vegas, my son, and I was thinking, what are you doing there, So I called him up, and so this is the codependency thing, right? Where I said, let me collapse here, for a relapse on my codependency. And I said, look, dude, it's you got a year sobriety, that's not the place to be. And we had a trip coming up, and I'm just like, I don't want to have to deal with this stuff again. And he didn't have the answers, and so I knew something was up. And so I told him I loved him, like we all do. Usually first responders will, I know that I do, tell our loved ones that we love them before we hang the phone up, because we don't know, what's going to happen tomorrow, because we see it daily, right? So that's one of the benefits of dealing in trauma, I think, is sometimes is that you make sure things that need to be said are said, and that was one of the benefits of my younger son's battle with the cancer, is that when he died, I said everything I needed to say. There wasn't anything left unsaid. He knew how much I loved him.
That's so true.
But I think we do that just as first responders with their families as well. So I hung the phone up, just telling him I loved him a lot, and he said the same thing. And then the next day they found him dead, and he had overdosed heroin and fentanyl, and it was the heroin was cut with the fentanyl, and so he died. And so now I just lost my second son, and to me, it was like, that's the spiritual battle. It's like the enemy didn't want us over there. So, I believe that Satan killed my boy. The Lord took him. My boy knew the Lord, but the Lord took him. But there's this battle, and it was like, okay, it's on. And the battle isn't like some angry battle. It's the Bible says, don't be overcome by evil, overcome evil with good. And so that's been just another thing that's another arrow in my quiver, that is just like, okay, because of my faith and because of just understanding how things work spiritually, that we're able to bring this program into a place that's pretty dark. There's a lot of dark stuff going on over there in Vegas, and the cops and the firefighters, and they're exposed to things that are real heavy. And but I also had to take some of my own advice again, and that was to reach out, because the grief this time, it manifests, and grief is something that happens. What it does is it like goes to every fracture in your foundation that's there, and it brings stuff up, and so I had laid things down when I went through the counseling with my first child after he died. But I hadn't dealt with it, and so I went in and I have this awesome clinician, and she is just like amazing, and just started to actually deal with the trauma that I had experienced on the job. One of the traumas was seeing my first child dead. Because when I walked in there, I couldn't get rid of that picture. I still can't, and I'm going through a process right now. It's called EMDR, and we're just, I'm such a complex case. I think that we haven't started that yet, but it's it's opening up a lot. When I sat down with her and she says, okay, so tell me about the three big T's, the traumas, and so you can think of three right off the top of your head where you're like, and then she says, and when you do that, I want you to think about children. I want you to think about elderly. I want you to think about, and so then all these other things come up, and it was just like ripping that Band-Aid off. And but I'm grateful because I'm seeing the impact that it's having on me now. Because before it wasn't that's how At Ease started, but it wasn't At Ease. It was a different program, it was a different counselor that I was seeing, and they didn't deal with the trauma. So now to be able to be in there with somebody that understands it and can walk me through it and, help, file things away. And it's not like we shove stuff down. I mean, that's what I used to do, shove it down. I hope it never came up, right? But now just going, okay, when this memory comes up, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to let this affect you? And so and amongst all the things that I've gone through as a cop and losing, two children, I also, went through my own cancer battle where, basically I wasn't supposed to be around for this podcast, according to some people, but I'm here. And so I've seen, and that battle was, that to me was a lot easier than going through, watching my son go through a cancer battle. But what happened is I have to say, and I just want to back up a little bit, after my first son died, God gave me like strength. He gave me comfort. He gave me like all of his promises, right? But there was one thing that was missing, and it was joy. And I didn't have it. I didn't have it for 7 years until I went through my own cancer battle. And it was once, and I had a big surgery. It was colon cancer, and they had to, it was pretty gnarly. My stomach was like open for 8 months while I'm getting chemo, and it was, the whole thing. It was pretty. But once I got on the other end of that, I ended up, the joy popped up, and I don't even know why, but I do, because I knew that I was around for a reason, And so I retired from the police department 5 years ago. This program started up, 3 years before I retired, and I have to say that. Being of service to the fellow first responders and seeing what's happening and actually experiencing it myself is, I have, to some people, what would be a sad story, but it's not to me, because I have a lot of joy, and I have more joy than I've ever had in my whole lifetime this very day, moving forward, because of hope, because of faith, because of being of service to others at a level where, I'm serving those who serve, and it's been incredible. So the program is, it's everybody that's involved in this, in 911 at Ease International is here because of the mission. It's all very mission focused. So the people that work for us are first responders that are retired, or they're people that have a heart for first responders, or are married to one, or have a family member that is one, and then also the clinicians, they're mission focused, and then the donors and the support systems that are out there, they're all mission focused. We get a lot of support from unions as well. I was the president of the Police Officers Association for a lot of years, so I spent about 29 of my 31 years in the leadership in the POA, either as president or on the board somewhere, and served on PORAC board of directors too. It's something that a lot of POAs and DSAs deputy sheriff's associations, police officer associations can invest into their members, and they're seeing that, as we go in, because we don't go in saying, hey, here's this program, we're trying to dig into your pockets. We're just like, hey, we're here, we're serving your people, and here's the benefit, and by the way, this is how many people are using this program, and when they see that, they're like, in the deputy sheriff's association, both the managers and the DSA, they come in with some big money to help us out with this, and same thing down in Ventura, locally, and all throughout the whole country. So it's a way that we can invest in ourselves as well. And God provides. It's not like I got to go out there and I got to raise money. I never thought I would have to raise money, but it's not like you got to ask anybody for it. you just let them know what we're doing and what the mission's about. And people they want to be a part of it, and they want to help out, and it makes them feel better. Going back to that firefighter, it makes them feel better.
I want to go back to one kind of odd question before I jump back to what we were just talking about. But when that joy came back, do you remember the first moment you realized you had joy, or what it was about? Because that's such like a flip switch.
I think I did, and it came along with I knew that I was on the other side. I'd made it through the chemo. I'd done through everything that I was supposed to do, and then it's like then I was back, and I was back on the job. I got neuropathy really bad from the chemo. It took out all the nerves in my hands and my feet, and so it made me, I wasn't able to, like do a building search where, because you don't realize how much you use your, so when you have to look at your feet to make sure that you're walking up the steps the right way, and and you're not looking for the suspect on a building search, that gets a little dangerous, or somebody pushes you and you fall over. So I ended up the last year of my career, I was working at an admin spot. It's the first admin spot I had, but it also was a spot that helped me start to address wellness issues. We had a chief that was big into wellness, and so we started to do that, and alongside everything that was going on with At Ease, it was just I just knew that now I had this purpose, and I think we all need that purpose. It's like every cop needs a hill to charge, right? I mean, we're no good without a fight. We just aren't, I
think it's why a lot of retired guys start to struggle.
Yeah,
they don't know what their next mission is. Same with veterans coming out of the service. Yep. They just don't know where that goes.
Yeah, because they're warriors, and that's the way we were created. You and I and everybody else that wears that badge or serves in the military, they're warriors. So you need that fight, and it's not like a mean fight. It's fighting for good,
But that purpose and mission.
Yeah. But you got to have that. You got to have that purpose, and so I think that moment of joy was like, okay, I'm here. God's gonna still use me, and
I've got something left in me to give.
Yeah, I got something left to give, and so for me, it's just like when I go. It's going to be in mid-stride, you know what I mean? It's just like, I ain't stopping, Sometimes people are like, hey, Mike, slow down. And I'm like, nah, no time.
Too much to do.
Yeah, too much to do.
The last time I saw you, last time we got to exchange some hellos was at Matthew's funeral. Mm-hmm. And you gave a eulogy there too. And what struck me, and I think absolutely everybody in that room, because it was commented about as we were waiting to say hello or at the luncheon afterwards, was how crystallized you seemed to be around this mission, and how this death of your second son was going to help you move forward with this mission to serve more people.
Yeah.
And how you were, and I was talking with a wide variety of people. There were clinicians from 911 At Ease there. There were chiefs and admin from different agencies there. A lot of people came out. There were friends of yours there. Chaplains were there. But everybody that I spoke to was completely dumbstruck by how you had chosen and made an active choice to use such a tragic event to propel yourself forward into this next mission. And you've come through that, at least from the outside, with such, like, you know it when you meet people. Like there's certain people you meet in your life, and they know where they're going, and they have it in their head what the end result looks like to them, and you're one of those people. And just watching you use, I mean, the death of your son in such a positive light, and looking for a way to look at it and say, what can this teach me, and then how can this help me serve other people? And you've done that, through your career with when you said, after your first son's death and how you ended up showing up at all the death notifications and all the death calls, and realizing that was how you were meant to serve in that moment. And I think any of this could be taken from whether you're a person of faith or not, looking at how or what positions you've been put in through whatever you want to call it, but then finding that you have a purpose in being there, and how can you best serve that purpose, and I think you're just a great example of using these things to then be of service again and again and again and in different ways. And now, having marched this path that you've marched, which, like you said, so many people would explain it as a tragedy, but you don't use those words about your own path, but to then look at how you are able to incorporate all of those things into having walked this path yourself already, and you're still doing it. You're still walking that same path through your own counseling, but then turning around and looking for the ways that you can serve all these other people that needed to. It's just, I really am stunned. And I'm so thankful that you exist. You exist as a person, but also that you exist with this passion for this project that is expanding now nationwide, that I just think is an absolute game changer for how first responders are going to be able to get treatment and destigmatize this entire issue, but also normalize it. It's just, I'm so thankful that you're here, Mike, really.
Thank you, Garrett. And I'm thankful that you're doing what you're doing as well. I mean, it's important to get these testimonies out and to steward them and to share our hearts. And I mean, we got to be real with each other. You know what I mean? And just to have a venue like this where you can speak to other cops, but also the community and whoever's listening. Just to know that it's okay. People, you're going to go through stuff, and but there's help that's out there, and we have to open ourselves up to it. So
it's someone listening right now. I guarantee someone who's listening to this is struggling. They don't know where to start. They're hurting beyond a way that they can comprehend or that they can articulate. And I want to just put on record that here we are. You just shared your story with me, and you're smiling as you said that. And I just want to emphasize to people that there is a path that they will take. It's not going to seem obvious at times. It won't be maybe the thing you think you need or what you want to need.
Right.
It might be something entirely different, but there is a path. And then you can sit here having come through all of that with a smile on your face and realizing that you're still here to serve.
Yeah.
Where can people learn more about 911 at ease and learn about the program if they want to try and bring it into their area?
Sure. We have a website. It's 911aei.org. And so if you go on the website, people can use the service. We're set up to, if somebody called that today, we're going to serve them, even if we have an office that's not in their area. We have national nonprofits that are partnering up with us to be able to provide those services and qualified clinicians. But you can learn more about the program there. There's a video that's on there. It's worth the watch. It's about 8 minutes long, but I suggest clicking on that because it really explains what we do, and it's got the testimonies of a few people that have gone through the program after some pretty traumatic things in their lives. But it's a place that is, it's just been amazing to be a part of this, and that's all I am. I'm just a part of this, you know what I mean? So I might have a title, but really I'm just a part of something that's really great and big and very special and involves a lot of people. So I'm I'm so grateful to be working with them and be of service to those who are doing a difficult job. This job's it's tougher than it's ever been.
Yeah,
and I see that. It's a new generation. But I'm glad that we're able to be part of that change in this area and to bring something positive to a very noble profession.
Yeah, to emphasize one quick story before we wrap up, but to emphasize how great your organization is, I had a listener reach out and ask for help, and if I knew of anybody, this is a little bit ago now, that maybe like 8 months ago now, if I knew of any clinicians in Texas who specialized, or it was in a specific area of Texas, and I didn't. And so I shot off a text message to your program director, Jeff McGrew. Jeff will be on the show at some point as well. Jeff's got a long history in law enforcement. He's like the Energizer Bunny for your organization. He's all over the place creating these programs and building them out. He absolutely is. So I shot him a text message and said, hey, do you guys have anything going in Texas? He said, no, I don't, but give me 30 minutes. And by the end of the day, I had hooked up that cop in Texas with a clinician I had never met, but who was culturally competent because of the network that you had created, you and Jeff and your whole organization had created, that you were able to reach out to somewhere that you're not even there yet and help this guy out. And I later got back word from them sometime later about how impactful that was on their life, not just their career. So nice. Amazing thing to happen. Yeah. Mike, thanks for being here. We'll put links in the show notes for this episode to everything that you're doing so people can learn more. They can just go to the show notes for whatever podcast player they're on and click through those and find out more. And we'll have more people from At Ease on in the future, and want to find ways, because I do think this is the game changer for how we solve this. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're new to the show, make sure you check through our catalog of episodes, because you're going to find some amazing guests and some great actionable ideas you can take into your day. Also, I want to offer you something I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. It's my Tactical Tuesday newsletter. Every Tuesday, I want to bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be a book I want to share, some gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there, and I promise we won't sell or spam your email address. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, if you were inspired by our conversation today, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends, people who you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend that they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. If you have a few seconds, please leave a comment with your review, because it really helps us spread the word about the show, and it helps more cops find the valuable lessons that we have here. Also, join us on Facebook at our Facebook group, follow our page, and on Instagram at The Squad Room. A special thanks to today's sponsor, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important, check them out at OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room, where their deal for you as a listener of this show is they'll give you a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up. Also, there are some other great companies who support the podcast and support you as well. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, Ranger Up, Hardhead Veterans, and Audible. And if you're looking for the best fitting ballistic helmet that exceeds NIJ standards and won't break the bank, check out hardheadveterans.com and use the coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your helmet. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.